to where your situation was already bad, but it went from bad to worse. And here she is. She's saying, this thing is out of control. I'm dying. You know what she's doing? She's taking her problems to the wrong window of exchange. And she's getting nothing in return. And I think I want to tell you today, if you're going to make it, you got to change windows. I was in Shreveport just a few months ago, and I decided that I would run down the hall quickly and I would get me some towels. I put the latch in the door to keep the door cracked so I can just walk back in. But to my surprise, on my way back, there was another room. They had the latch in their door too, and their door was cracked. And I walked in, but to my surprise, it wasn't my room. Doors look similar, but it might not be the door that you need to walk in. And somebody here tonight, you're messed up because you've been walking in doors that was not intended for you. Here's a woman, she's been walking through the wrong door 12 years. But then the text shows us that she has this providential optimism. Providence, that pro means before, that video means to see. When you break it down, it means to see to it beforehand. Optimism means that you got to be positive about this thing. You see, how can you be optimistic when you got to miss the optic? You catch that in a minute. I said, how can you be optimistic when you got to miss the optic? You see, she said to herself before she got there that when I get there, this is going to be the end of this trouble. When you really believe God, they used to say it in the old time way, if you ask God for rain, you ought to put up your umbrella even if the sun is shining. Your faith ought to be so strong that if you ask God for food, even if there's nothing in the refrigerator, you ought to go ahead and set the table, because by the time the day is over, you believe God's going to provide some kind of way. This woman says, listen, if I can just get to this Jesus man. Two or three things I want to say about that. Number one, she was tuned into a faith frequency, because the text says she heard of Jesus. See, if you're going to come out, if you're really going to believe and behave, you've got to surround yourself with some God did it people. Matter of fact, you ought to look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I just need to know, has he done anything for you? You see, when you're going through, you need more than just a cheap happy hour when everything is half off. When you're going through a situation, brothers and sisters, you need to surround yourself with some people that are miracles. Some people, if you're sick, you need to hang around healed people. Do I have some help in here? If you're bound, you need to hang around some delivered people. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I need to know, has God done anything for you lately? When I come to church, I know you've heard it before. When I come to church, I just can't sit down beside anybody. I have to check you out before I sit down. So every now and then you ought to step to the end of the row and say, you know what, the Lord has been good to me. And if they look at you funny, you know that's not your seat. If you step to the next row and say, you know what, make a joyful noise unto the Lord. If they look at you funny, you know that's not your seat. But if you slide over to the next row and say, oh, magnify the Lord with me, and they say, watch it and let us exalt his name together, you tell them, scoot over, because it looked like you came to get something from God tonight. And is there anybody here that pressed your way through the snow and ice tonight to believe that God's going to do something special in your situation, because there's a blessing in the pressing, but you need him to survive? The text says she heard. You got to hear a word in your situation, because faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. When you're going through situations, you don't need to hear what Oprah has to say. You don't need to hear what Dr. Phil has to say. No. You need to hear a word from the Lord. But then when you get there, not only do you need to be tuned into a faith frequency, but you got to have a firm focus. Because when you get there, you're going to see some stuff that will distract you. And distractions will ultimately detour you. And when you take a detour, it will ultimately delay you. And then, watch this, you'll end up traveling on a road that's not headed where you're trying to go. What was her distraction? The crowd was in the way. And she made up her mind, I've come this far. Now, there's life over there and death right here. Now, if I turn around and go back, there's nothing but a cemetery waiting on me. But if I go over there and just touch him, there's a whole city that can be available for me. And somebody here, you need to make up your mind that I decided not to die over here. If you're in my way, I'm going to have to move you out of my way. And don't you see her moving and busting through the crowd saying, I need to get to Jesus. And guess what? Most of the folk that's in the way don't need what you need. Have you ever had people that's always trying to analyze and criticize you for your shouting and your praise and your worship and how many times you come to church? Well, those are people that don't need what you need. If you were in the shoes that I have to stand in, do I have some help in here? If you had to stay one night in my house, you would feel like I feel. Give somebody a high five and say, don't criticize me because you don't know what I'm going through. Come on, tell somebody, I'm tired of trying to fake it until I make it. I want to come in here and be real about my situation. And if I got to move you out the way, I got to get you out the way because I decided that I'm going to live and I shall not die. Oh, man, that's about for 10 people in here. If that's for you, if you're in that number, that 10, I want you to grab somebody and shake their hand like you're going to shake it off and say, neighbor, I decided that I'm going to live and I'm not going to die. I'm going to bounce back. I'm not going to be in this. There's going to be a change. The text says, she pressed. She pressed. She pressed. Look at somebody and say, neighbor, she pressed. Tell them again, tell them, neighbor, she pressed. Watch this. She pressed her way through the crowd and said, if I can just lay my hands on him. And the text says she touched. Now watch this. Now that word touch does not mean just to go there and just literally just lay your hands on his garment. That's not, it sounded good back in the old day how we touched the H-E-M of the H-I-M, him. That sounds good, but that's not theologically sound. That word touch in the Greek means haptomai. You know what that means? That means to hold on. So watch this. She pressed her way through the armor bearers. She got through all the adjutants and said, listen, I'm so serious about surviving this situation until I ain't got nothing else to do but hold on. And every now and then, life will do you that way till all you can do is just hold on. Who am I talking to in here tonight? That you at a place that all you can do, the only thing you got left is just enough strength to just hold on. It's rough, it's tough, it's hellacious in your life, but I'm holding on. Look at somebody and say, neighbor, I'm just going to hold on. That's all I can do. I don't know how I'm going to come out, but I'm going to hold on. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm going to hold on. Give somebody a high five and say, neighbor, I'm going to hold on. Okay, that was the wrong neighbor. Look at the person on the other side and say, neighbor, I'm going to hold on. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold on. If it take me 9 years, 10 years, 50 years, 60 years, I'm going to hold on because I believe that a change. She didn't just. Look at somebody and say, tighten your grip. That person didn't receive it. Look at somebody else and say, neighbor, you need to tighten your grip.